the piece of advice that I would leave any woman who is considering or in a career in sales, there is absolutely a place and a pathway for you. If you want to do this as a career or have this as a role, as a step in your career, you can absolutely become successful at this. There is no reason that you can't. It is a lot of hard work, but this is an incredibly rewarding career.
This isn't your average revenue podcast. It's Ashley and Katrina's Infinite Revenue Playlist, powered by Comsor. And it's your new work bestie. Through conversations with other women in the revenue space, Ashley and Katrina get candid about their unique experiences, help women tackle challenges in the workplace, and uncover ways to grow as revenue pros. Maybe you'll learn a little, cry a little, laugh a little, have an epiphany, or at the very least, get a killer playlist to listen to while you work. Being a woman in this industry is wild. Let's talk about it.
Hello, I'm Ashley.
And I'm Katrina.
Welcome to Ashley and Katrina's Infinite Revenue Playlist. Today, we're joined by the one and only Alexine Mudawar, CEO and founder of Women in Sales. Alexine, thank you for joining us.
Thanks
for having me on. I'm so excited for this.
Yay. I'm going to read your bio really quick. I don't know that you need a huge introduction, but just in case anyone on doesn't know who you are, that'd be crazy. Alexine is very experienced. She has 10 plus years of SaaS sales experience. She's backed by numerous President's Club awards, quarterly high achievement recognitions, and a consistent track record of surpassing quota. She serves as CEO of Women in Sales with a focus on elevating, empowering, and promoting women within the sales profession. She's been recognized as a top voice from LinkedIn and Salesforce, and she's also one of Crunchbase's most influential women in sales. Before we get into it, quick recap of why our podcast exists.
So for those that are returning listeners, you know that we have a little bit of a musical twist to the podcast. It's called the Infinite Revenue Playlist because we have all of our guests select their own walk-up song, since we are often compared to athletes as sellers and other revenue-related roles. So the walk-up song is meant to symbolize either you as a professional or kind of pump you up before you step out onto the field, or in our case, walk into work and crush your day. So with that in mind, Alexine, what is your walk-up song?
My walk-up song, which may come as no surprise, is Run the World by Beyonce. I'm very excited about that.
Any Beyonce song is a safe bet for a walk-up song. So
yeah.
And I'm surprised you're the first person actually to pick a Beyonce song.
It's true.
Oh, wow. Interesting. Yeah, it felt very fitting. And also, fun fact, Beyonce and I have the same birthday. And so I feel like there's something there.
Beyonce missed her calling. She should have been in sales.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we're both Virgos, little Virgo queens out there.
Love it. So I feel like this song kind of speaks for itself, but we'd love to hear from you why this was your walk-up song of choice.
I think, honestly, it was really low-hanging fruit. Like, I love Beyonce. I did go to the Beyonce concert in Chicago a few years ago. Yes, I did cry while I was there, even though I don't think it was like a crying moment. But it was just really, I just find her so empowering, and I love her music. I love her style. I just think she's fabulous. And I just think a lot of what she does embodies what we're trying to do over at Women in Sales and empowering the next generation of women and helping them find their own voices. So felt like a good fit there.
I feel like this is a really good transition into the first thing I want to ask you about, which is your amazing community that both Ashley and I are a part of and absolutely love. I mean, you were obviously top choice for us to have on this podcast because, as you know, this is all about elevating the voices of women in revenue. And I think you've done an amazing job of that with this community. And I'd love to hear a little bit of kind of why you started this community in the first place, how it came to be, and anything you want to share about your amazing, wonderful community.
Yes, so very proud of Women in Sales. Thank you both for being part of the community. I'm just really excited watching people continue to find one another and connect with each other. So I consider us in like V2 of Women in Sales. I don't talk about this a lot, but V1, as I call it, was actually a clubhouse room. And so that was a weekly clubhouse session that was run. And we got into like a lot of really good conversations and topics. but gradually over time really wanted to take this in a direction where it was more of like a true community. And we had like a central meeting place and got Slack underway and started to have like an events calendar. And so what I consider B2 is really what happened at the beginning of this year, where we moved from the name Women in Sales Club to Women in Sales. So not too different, but just a slight deviation, redid all of our branding and website and really doubled down on a lot of what was working and started to drift into things that we believe deeply are going to work really well for the community long term. So I still feel like even though this is like 2.5 years now into the women in sales journey, I feel like we're just scratching the surface. Like we're just now starting to like really get into our events calendar, but the sky's the limit. Like there's just so much that we haven't even launched yet that's like kind of secret or happening behind the scenes. So I'm just very optimistic and excited.
I actually joined that clubhouse a couple weeks,
Ah.
like almost every week for a while there. I didn't say anything because I had kids at home during COVID, but was there stalking in the background.
We love a stalk. We love a healthy stalker. But yeah,
Yes.
but it is. Yeah, it was really great, and I think there was something like really special, and it was kind of nice. Like honestly, we do it on Saturdays, and you could like be in your PJs, and it was just audio only. So there is a part of me that's trying to figure out like how can we almost like replicate that same experience where we just have another like pajama party and go through like really cool tactical sales stuff. So that's one thing I'm kind of working on right now.
So
Just call it a pajama
why
party. I like it.
Sales
we'll,
pajama
we'll have to
party.
do another pajama party because I missed those. Why a women in sales community specifically?
So I think for me, the reason like I kind of like chuckle because people will be like, "Oh, where did this come about?" And I'm like, I think I was like trying to soft launch this for like many years, and so I would always launch like the first women's group within my organizations and like the ERGs, and I was kind of like leaving the little breadcrumbs along the way, I think, to get there. But for me, when I think back to 10 years ago when I started in tech sales, I came straight out of retail, went into tech sales, knew absolutely nothing and was doing like 175 plus cold calls a day, like total grind. But I fell in love with it because, that's how it goes. But I think about when I looked around that sales floor, and at the time when I was starting, there were very few women on the team. And so then I would look, 2 years in, and I'd look around and I was like, oh, there's still not really that many women on the team. Then 8 years in, and then 10. Ultimately, I'm like, I'm looking around and the demographic breakdown of the team hasn't changed that significantly since 10 years ago. And when you talk to people who have been in sales longer than me as well, who are like 20, 30, 40 years into this, similar kind of feelings where it's like we've definitely made progress. Maybe there's like 3 women for every 10 on the team, but that number is still like pretty far off from where I feel like it needs to be. And that's just thinking about like gender. There's so many other layers to like having diverse teams that we aren't even getting into. So for me, it just felt like here's a really obvious gap. And one of the pieces that I was really, and I took some heat for this early on, by the way, but one piece that I was like really determined on was how do we create a community for women in the field of sales? And how do we keep men engaged in the conversation, which I think has been the piece that's missing for a lot of communities and groups that have existed over the years. I felt like I would show up to these events and we would kind of talk about issues we were aware of and they would just kind of like stay with us and it never really like made progress. And so that was really a big driving force too, is like, how do we create this community that's of course focused on women in sales, but then on top of that, how do we keep men engaged in that dialogue and in that conversation so we can actually make changes and get some of this information moving up the leadership chain as well.
I think that's a really important piece of the conversation of how to also get men engaged in the conversation. And actually, when we were first defining the purpose of this podcast, originally we were told, by our producer, oh, it should be for women in revenue, right? And women in revenue only. And we actually pushed back a little bit because we were like, we think it should be about elevating the voices of women in revenue. But if we're just siloing ourselves in a box, how are we going to get men to be allies of women in sales, revenue, whatever the role is? And I'm curious, like, how does your community or how does what you do on a regular basis help kind of get men into the conversation and become those allies?
Yeah, I mean, I think step one is just making like having that awareness layer. Like that's something I'm constantly talking about, whether it's on social, in person, at events. Like I'm constantly doing a reminder of, hey, or even via DMs on LinkedIn every day. I probably send like 3 to 5 DMs at least where men in leadership roles, CROs will reach out to me and they'll be like, hey, I love what you're building. Super cool. Like I hope to have an impact I'm like, cool, have an immediate impact. Here's our Slack community. And they're like, well, could I join? Like, is it okay if I'm there? And I'm like, absolutely. Listen, learn, a volunteer to mentor where you can, like help where you're able to. But just have awareness of the conversation. So I think like first and foremost is just making sure people are aware of like what resources and communities and places exist, and making sure they're aware that they can show up if that's the case. And it's okay if some places that's not the case. So I think that's like kind of step one. And then I think, also like engaging, like I think about most of my mentors through my career, they've actually been men. They haven't so much been women. A lot of my mentors, especially some of my early mentors, were men within the leadership team who like took me under their wing. I think about like one of my very first mentors, and he was actually our company's CFO. And I used to joke about this because I would like write these 20-page business plans every year. And I was like, here's how I'm going to crush my quota. Like, here's what I'm going to do with my year. And everybody would like look at me like I was insane. But I remember showing this to my CFO at the time, and he was just like, what is this? And I was like, it's my business plan. I'm going to hit my goals. And so he's like, okay, we're going to sit down and go through your business. I'm going to read it and then I'm going to give you feedback. And he actually went through, and I was like waiting for this meeting. So I was like, he's going to tell me how good my business plan was. And we're going to have a meeting about how good I am. And he was like, okay, page one. He was like, I have questions and corrections. And we went one page at a time through 20 pages over a lunch. And so I just think about like things like that too, like mentorship, sponsorship, like thinking about these opportunities where you can actually work with women on the team. I think sometimes even as women as well, we'll go to people who seem like the most natural fit. Like a lot of times if people want me to mentor someone, they'll be like, here's this really bubbly and outgoing person. Like we want to match you two together. And I'm like, is that the only pretense for that? Like that might not be the right fit for me or for them. And so I think like looking outside of who might be the natural choice for some of those opportunities is another good place to kind of get men engaged in this conversation and engaged in the learning and development of more women in our field.
I think it's really an important call out. The thing about bubbly versus bubbly, like matching and matching. If there's only one woman on the leadership team, which is very common, if every woman has to choose that person as their mentor because that's what people see, that's a problem. So I think it's
Mhm.
really smart that you're calling out that men should and, well, they should and are sponsors for women often.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about how we had to decide which one of us was going to ask the next question. You often refer to the CEO role as just another sales role. Tell us about that because I think that's pretty cool.
Yes, I can now confirm I just finished my first full quarter as CEO, and I have officially deemed this my hardest SDR/AE role that I've ever had. And so it's so funny because I'll get messages or like friends will text me and they're like, "Oh, it sounds so fun to be a CEO." And I was like, "Which part?" Like I'm on like I have like 40 something meetings this week and I'm like drowning in work all the time, but it is incredibly rewarding. But what's funny is how much of a parallel there is between the AE role and the CEO role. I mean, there's nuances, of course, because there's like the finances, the business, like all the paperwork admin side, which I loathe. But then when I
Don't we
think
all?
about like, yeah, everybody hates it. But I think about like when I was trying to kind of like start out, like I'm building our partnerships program, I'm like managing our events calendar, I'm doing all these things. And what I realized was there is so much parity between the deal cycles I would work as an AE and the deal cycles that I work now. Some of them are really quick and transactional. Many of them, like our most recent one, just took 8 months. There isn't that much of a difference. Like I still have to create pricing resources and supporting materials and have those available. I have to do follow ups. I have the same like calendar cadence. Like if I talk to someone, I need next steps on the books. And if I don't have next steps, then I have like my follow up task 2 days later. I literally have a Salesforce instance. Like it's so like almost comedic how close it is to the AE roles that I had for many years. And I think something about that made moving into the CEO role so much less scary for me because I was like, okay, I know how to do the AE role. Like that I could do in my sleep. I've done it so many times. It's so second nature. Now I just need to apply that same practice and principles that I used to be successful there to the CEO role. And on top of that, I just need to learn how to do every other role that the business entails. So yeah, it is really like interesting how closely knit they are.
So our CEO at Comstor, who, as you both know, is actually also my brother,
Yes.
surprise, surprise.
Hey, Mac.
He often, hey Mac, shout out. He often refers to himself as a glorified account executive. He goes, every day, what I do is I sell Comstor, whether it's to an investor, to a partner, to an actual potential customer. And I think it's really cool because sales as an industry, I feel like sometimes gets a really bad rep, as we all know. People love to hate on sales that are not in
Yes.
sales. Even people in sales loves to hate on sales. We all hate
Yes.
on sales. And the fact is, it's what keeps the company running, right? You're the CEO now. You're the top person at your company, your community, and you're deploying sales tactics in order to make it successful, which I think is really cool. And as we know, you have been an extremely successful salesperson yourself. And I want to go back to that as, I know you're still a salesperson as CEO, but what were those tactics that you actually deployed as a salesperson to ensure you were successful?
Yeah, there's a few areas that I'm like very meticulous about. I have always been notorious for my overkill in CRM systems. Like I'm a diehard Salesforce user, shout out. But the
The
amount
sweatshirt.
I know, yeah, the sweatshirt, the amount of like details and notes and like follow-ups, like my task management system is tight. And I like started that year one in sales. My very first manager, who's like one of my good friends now. I just introduced her to her husband.
No
They just got
way.
married. And so it's so funny that she was like very meticulous with Salesforce. So she would like drive home like all these points and make me like go back and like redo my work or redo my notes. And it drove me absolutely crazy. And now because I had like those skills and I really was like very meticulous, that helped me significantly. So that's definitely like number one, like my ability to kind of like manage my day, manage a deal cycle, manage communications, like keep things in check and keep things moving forward. That's probably like my number one where I feel like I have a pretty tight grip on. And then honestly, like a lot of the same skills apply in terms of like objection handling, for instance. Like people, like the objections are different now. Like, for instance, I could be like trying to sell a partnership and a company might be like, okay, we don't like the current macroeconomic environment doesn't allow us to move forward. So now I have to like figure out how to work around that objection. So there is like a lot of that type of like, I guess, early work that I did a lot in sales that continued with me my whole AE career that is applicable as well. So I think like those are probably like two of the key areas are just kind of like those fundamentals, honestly, have just carried over really nicely.
Do you have any like specific examples for an account executive or an SDR potentially listening of like how exactly to do those two things? Like a bullet list of like, if you want to be more meticulous in keeping notes and keeping track of your pipeline, like what suggestions do you have?
Yeah, so I am the calendar queen. This is where like the Virgo shines. I live and die by my calendar. So my calendar is like sacred. So I have basically what I do is I have like a task management system. I have like my CRM kind of task management system, but like my must do's are at the top of my calendar for the day. So like I
Mm.
have usually like 3 to 4 things where I'm like, I'm not going to sleep until I finish these three to four things. So I have those like color coded for myself. And then I have my day, which I try to actually one thing, I don't know if other people do this as much, but I'm actually kind of meticulous about like how many of which type of meeting go where. So if I know like, hey, I have like four, like I'll kind of limit myself to like 4 to 5 like introductory sales calls in a day. I'm like anything else needs to push to like Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. It's like because my brain can only do so much. So I'm very like I like to color code the type of calls as well so that I can understand like what my day looks like. I'm not doing as much like I guess like true demoing now. I don't have like a SaaS platform, but when I did, same thing. I would do like 3 demos, usually max a day. That way, I wasn't like starting to like, you start to forget like what you're talking about at some point when you've done it so many times in a day. So that's another piece. And then the other thing I do is I'm very meticulous about like admin blocks and having like specific times. What I find is the more clarity you can give yourself, the better. So like I used to do this thing where I just block and put like hold, and I'd be like, that's my admin, email follow up, proposals, whatever time. I found that to be like very unhelpful because it was just too like vague. So what's helped me a lot more is I have those like tasks at the beginning of the day. And then at the end of the day, I have like little 30-minute chunks for myself that are like send proposals. And then it has like the list of companies I need to send them to. It says like, here are my email follow-ups. It needs to hit these 2 companies. And so that helps me. So I think as much as you can become very organized and use like a color coding system. I don't like red for whatever reason. So I do like blues and purples, but some people like to do like a red, yellow, green, and then just get really specific and start to get really honest with yourself too. The calendar system's only going to work if you actually use it and apply that. And so if you're someone who is just going to throw that stuff on there and then not actually do any of it, then that's a waste of your time. So I would say like really start to hold yourself accountable. And the sooner you master that, not only is that going to help like your SDR, AE, whatever career, but if you move into this path of CEO, it's like it's a non-negotiable. Like you have to be good at organizing your day and you have to be really thorough with those follow-ups. So that's probably like the most tactical advice I would share. Even though it seems basic for some people, it's not for a lot.
I definitely do the color coding as well and do anything that can potentially make me money green. I don't think I do red either, which I don't know why, but I also stray away from the red.
Yeah, it scares me. It's like a very like alert color. I
Alert,
don't like
exactly.
yeah, I like dark. So I do like the darker the tone, like the more immediate the task is. So my like super
Okay.
dark blue is like, okay, I have to get this done today. But like a red, I think would give me anxiety.
I love it.
I put mine on paper and I don't color code. So everyone's different.
Psycho.
That's
No.
right.
I know, such a crazy person.
Shame.
I
I'm just
know.
kidding.
I
I
am
do like
fine.
paper. There is something fun about like checking stuff, like physically checking stuff
Yeah.
off a sheet. So I do get that.
Yeah,
I do
I
both
like
sometimes.
to have it.
I worked with an AE at my last company who didn't put anything in his calendar, never took notes, never did anything. He's a top performer. Keep this in mind. I was like, I don't know what's going on in your brain, but it must be straight chaos. You chose violence with how you handle your pipeline.
Like not even
Okay,
his
yeah.
meetings.
No.
Okay, unpopular opinion, maybe. Those are the worst salespeople because more likely than not, people are not going to stay at their companies forever. So even though that person is a high performer, they tend to end up being what I call like a CRM nightmare because for years, like
Oh,
I
totally.
took over books for some of these people and it's like years later, we're like still trying to decode and figure out like, is this person even a customer? We have like no record of them. We don't know how to. So again, the meticulousness, it pays off both for yourself and for your team long term. I can testify to that.
So if you're listening, take notes, not just for you, but for your team.
Help your team. Help your sales admin person. Your poor sales admin is struggling.
Yeah, that's a problem.
Well, speaking of being a number one performer, we know that you have a history of exceeding quota, but I saw that you recently made a post about stepping away from, having a quota, even though you're the top performer. And I'd love to learn a little bit more about that choice.
I do have a quota now though. My quota is so it's interesting. I don't have like a quota that was decided by a company. Like I had to kind of choose my own based on like historic results. So I actually find it really interesting because previously I would just kind of get a number, whatever it is, $1 million. I have no idea where that number came from. I can look through like the database and try to figure something out. More likely than not, it was something that was decided by the board and kind of like brought over to me. So actually the quota thing is super interesting because I'm probably tracking my quota closer now than I ever have. And I have done the same thing that I did year one in sales for the last 10 years, which is I have my regular quota target and then I have my stretch goal. And then there is a part of me because I'm almost at 50, I'm getting towards like 50% of my stretch goal. And I'm like, okay, I feel like I could have made even the stretch goal a little more aggressive. So there's a part of me that may launch a stretchy stretch goal. So that's
triple
that's on the horizon. But I actually find the quota to be incredibly helpful now because it's really good to be able to like understand where I'm at for the year. Like I could just like close stuff and hope for the best. But for me, I have like a little thermometer thing. It's like really like cheesy, but I like seeing like that fill up. I like seeing where I'm at. I have a lot of calculations. I'm all over in Excel, but I'll have like calculations that are showing me like percent to goal and like how much of the year. Right now, I'm in the process of like moving some of this into Salesforce as well so that my CRM system can kind of act and as this resource. But I actually find the quota now probably to be more relevant than ever before.
Do you find that you're more sympathetic towards what the number for the quota is?
I don't know. I don't know how I feel about quotas now because I'm like, here's a goal that I set for myself that was honestly like a really ambitious target. And now I'm like pacing above that. And so I don't know. I see how hungry and excited that makes me. So there's a part of me that's just like, what a missed opportunity when these companies throw out numbers that are what I call faux TE, a fake OTE, basically, where it's just a number that's like almost like impossible or practically impossible, or one person's hit it ever and the rest of the team never has. It kind of bums me out because I'm like, I feel so much hungrier and more excited when I know that I can actually like pace towards this target. But I also know that I don't have like a board to report to. I don't have investors that I have to talk to. I don't want investors. And so it's really interesting to be on the other side of it where I'm like, I'm just hyper focused on what I'm building and what I believe in. And I have my own targets, my own numbers. And yes, they're ambitious, but I know that I can actually have a shot at hitting them, which is exciting.
It's also
Shouldn't be that rare.
partially,
I
yeah,
know.
it's a
Yeah.
psychological thing. If no one ever hits quota, right? Everyone's disappointed and going to leave and go somewhere where they can hit quota.
Yes. And then it just like continues because then, and this is why I'm like a big fan. Like now we're seeing more data sources and things coming out that will actually like, help you make good decisions. But yeah, I mean, it's like then the clock resets though. So I'm an AE, I go to the next company. I just got my new $1 million quota. It's like, it's really hard. And I think that's something to acknowledge too. Like as a seller, it's hard to pick the right companies. And it's even harder when the environment that we're in is so chaotic and changing every day. So even when you think you picked the right company, like even those numbers like could have been realistic a year ago and now they're not. So it's a total mixed experience in sales.
So this is kind of not relevant at all, but we're talking a lot about sales, and I want to pivot back to like being a woman in sales. And I'm wondering if there's any piece of advice that you would specifically give women who are in revenue facing roles, maybe just getting into it, or I mean, we've talked to a couple people who said it's really hard and sometimes I fail. How do I pick myself back up and keep going? Like, what is your advice for women who are trying to be successful in sales?
Okay, I have like a softball answer, which is like seek out communities, get involved, get to know other women because you'll feel less alone, especially if you're on a team where there's like 2 women to 20 guys. Like it can feel very much like you're on an island and it's just really easy to kind of get in your head. And so I highly recommend communities. Of course, shout out women in sales. But I think the other piece of advice, which I would have definitely given myself this early on, is focus on like being yourself, which sounds really cheesy, but I spent so much time like that first like 5-ish years of sales. I tried so hard to like fit in with the guys on the team. I hate sports. I have a shirt on right now that says it's the NFL logo and it says IDC for I don't care. Like it just like I loathe sports. So I was like, and then I, was trying to like keep up with the going out culture and like what everybody else was doing and the topics that they're talking about. I just didn't like fit. I always felt like this like circle and a square and it just like never really lined up for me. So I think just like focusing on the fact that if you got hired for one of these roles, whether it's an SDR, an AE, manager, whatever that role is, it's because you're good at what you do and that you have potential in the field of sales. And so trying to like really figure out what your secret sauce is and like really figuring out who you are and what you're going to do that's going to make you a really good seller, because that's just not going to be the same thing for everyone else on your team. So I know it sounds like a little kitschy, but I know for myself, like that would have been my number one thing, would have just been like, be yourself and stop focusing so much on what everybody else is doing.
We've talked about this before.
Yes.
Yeah. And back when you were on the teams that were predominantly male, did you ever have any experiences where you were like, whoa, I really am kind of like the token woman on the team?
Yeah, I have like a PTSD from this. I had a manager years ago and every one-on-one, he would start by saying, so there were only 2 women on the team. There were 2 women and the rest of the team was men. And he would go, don't you want to be the top girl on the team? Don't you want to beat her? And that was like our one-on-one. And I was like, it starts off on like the worst note every week. It put me in the worst mood. And so it created this like animosity between she and I. And I was like, why don't we not like each other. Like, I was like, I don't think we don't like each other. I think we're like being pit against one another. And it took me like a little while to see that. But I watched that repeat at other companies too, where it'd be like there's only one or two other women on the team. And then behind closed doors, my manager would say things like that. Like, don't you want to beat her? Like, I know you want to beat her and I was like, frankly, I don't, because if we're like 19 and 20 on the sales team, who gives, like, who cares? We're both sucking. So I need us to be at like I want to beat her if she's number one and I'm number two. That's where that's interesting. Or if she's number two and I'm number three. Other than that, I'm not like super focused on that. But that was like one of the big moments where I would start to see that happen a lot when it was just a couple of us. And I realized that wasn't the same conversation that other men on the team were having with one another.
I think there's a bit of a scarcity mindset when it comes to women in sales where, I mean, it's you're literally being pitted against each other, your own teammate by your manager. And I think sometimes when we get to a team where there's not that many women, we're like, oh, there's only space for one. There's
Hmm.
only space for one woman to succeed, which is not the truth, right? And it's sad that some managers are not able to, I think, support women in the way that they should be. And the result is actually having some animosity. And I remember at a company where I started off as the only woman account executive globally. And then 5 months into the role, another woman joined in a different office, but her onboarding was in New York City, where my office was based. And I was really excited for her to join. And I introduced myself when she walked in the door, and I was like, wow, she was really cold towards me. And I couldn't figure it out. I was like, why doesn't she like me? And then later in the week, we ended up going to lunch, had a really great conversation, hit it off. And it wasn't until after she left, she sent me an email. Was like, I was really scared to meet you. I haven't had good experiences with other women in sales. I thought you weren't going to like me. It really surprised me. And I was like, what? Her mindset coming into it was that I automatically wasn't going to like her because I was the token woman on the team that was already there taking up that space.
Yes, the queen bee syndrome. Like, this is a whole topic that we did like multiple sessions around that we definitely will keep doing sessions on, but it's so prevalent, and I think it's hard because it's a hard topic because I feel like the onus typically comes back on women, and it's like, why do you hate each other? And it's like, I don't think we do. I think that a lot of forces kind of pit us against each other against our will. But I think like what you did, Katrine, like that's something that I started to do like a few years back where I was like, if I feel that like rumbling inside of me where it's almost like this weird animosity, I don't know where it came from, there's no reason for it. I booked a lunch. So I started going to lunch with the other women on the team and started becoming friends with them. But that took me like years to even get to that point. And then we'd go to lunch and all of a sudden it would just all come out. It was like, isn't that annoying? Like, does this happen behind the scenes at your one on one? Yes. Are you getting told this as well? Yes. Okay, so now we have like kind of reconfirmation of like what's happening and we can work towards solutioning. But I think that it's just so prevalent and part of this journey, the women in sales community is also me acknowledging and honoring like, hey, I don't think I was like everyone's best friend that first few years in sales. I think I kind of sucked at certain points and I want to take ownership of that and I want to help make the future better and I want for the next generation of women coming in to maybe not face that animosity. And so I just think the more we talk about that, the more we get in these communities and these spaces together, the more we start to dissect why we're feeling certain ways and certain things, then we can move past some of this and move to, the really good stuff. Because the other thing I think about is like, a lot of times people will ask about webinars and they're like, yeah, we want to speak on women in sales or, what event are you hosting that's women in sales? I'm like, we also have just really badass women who know what they're doing. So we can also we have a session tomorrow that's on like cold prospecting and messaging. Like we're going to talk about like actual tactical sales content because that's what we're good at. And so I think the future for all of this is I'm very optimistic and bullish. Like I think we're moving in a better direction. I think it's taking longer than what any of us had hoped.
Yeah, I think half the battle is speaking about it, which is what we're doing and which is why we're so happy you're here.
Yes, I know it's fun.
You gotta own it. You gotta like voice it or it doesn't get better.
Yes.
I love the idea of just booking a lunch with your new fellow women teammates whenever they walk in the door. Just make it part of your routine. Get to know them. There's room for everyone.
Yes. And you know what I learned was once I started doing those lunches and once I started to actually have like girlfriends that were on my team with me and we like had good relationships, we were like the biggest hype people. Like we would like be the first people to congratulate each other, the first people like after a really good call to like say nice job, we'd be slacking each other. Like it was just a very different feel and I wish more than anything that I had started that earlier and that had been my experience sooner, but I do think that we are really good hype women for one another when the circumstances are right and when we can get past some of that stuff too. And I think this community is also a testament to that. I look at the posts that people make and people are looking for roles or just resume advice or they need help with prospecting technique and I'll see like 10 people just volunteer immediately. And it's just really cool to watch and cool to be part of.
I don't know if you know this, but Ashley and I actually met in a community. We've never even met in
Oh.
person, which is crazy to me.
What? I've met
Yep.
Ashley in person.
Ew, jealous.
Vegas.
One day we'll get there.
Ashley and Alexine took Vegas together.
Yes, we did.
What? I want to go to
Among
Vegas
like
with you guys.
a lot of other people too.
Yeah,
but
there were
yes.
more than just the
Okay.
two of us, but I feel like we were key players, so that's fine.
I love it. But I mean, I think you're so right. It's like once you become friends, your fellow women salespeople or just coworkers in general are the biggest hype people that are out there. And Ashley and I don't even work together. And we tell each other everything about our deals, what's in our pipeline, how's it going? Did we close something? Did we lose something? And we're always there to support each other. So I'm very grateful for her.
I have
that.
ugly cried on Zoom with Katrina.
That was early on too.
It was
I
like
think
the
that was like
second
our
conversation
yeah.
we ever had, and I was like, "I'm so sorry. This is
You know
really
what?
hard."
Sometimes that's necessary. Sometimes you just got to get it out. That might be part of the message here too. It's like sometimes you may need a session like that.
It's really
Exactly.
it's really impactful to have a friend who is also a woman who has faced the same struggles and not have the fear of like our bosses are going to hear us bitching together and like we don't want to be seen as negative because sometimes you have to ask someone if they have space for your vent sesh.
Mhm.
You can't just do it. You have to be like, are you good? Like, is it okay if I start ugly crying for you right now? And I feel like sometimes it's easier when that person isn't in the same org. But on the
Yes.
flip side, some of my best friends are women that I worked with. And I think the lunches were a good call.
Good.
Ashley, do you want to ask a few more questions or should we jump to the would you rather ones? I know we have about 10-ish minutes left.
We can do would you rathers. I don't know. I know we wanted to talk about girl on girl crime, which we just totally did. So
Yeah.
I think we can put that to bed. No more
Yeah,
of
I
that.
guess if there's, I know we've asked you this kind of in a million different ways, but if there's like one final piece of advice or information you want to leave women in revenue with, what would it be?
The piece of advice that I would leave any woman who is considering or in a career in sales is there is absolutely a place and a pathway for you. If you want to do this as a career or have this as a role, as a step in your career, you can absolutely become successful at this. There is no reason that you can't. It is a lot of hard work, but this is an incredibly rewarding career. This has given me a pathway to financial freedom. It's given me the ability to move to a CEO role within my first 10 years of my career. And it's given me the ability to connect with thousands of people over the last decade, which I never would have had the opportunity to do. And so, all this to say, I think that sales is an incredible career. Obviously, I'm, a super fan over here. But I think that if you want to do this, you absolutely can. And there is a place for you in this field.
I love that sentiment. And with that said, we're going to move on to our rapid fire round of would you rather questions. Don't feel the need to explain yourself if you don't want to, or you can say why you picked one. But we've got, let's see, normally we have 5, but it looks like we've got 6 planned for you. So,
Oh, no.
you ready?
It's our
I
stretch
think
goal.
It's a stretch goal. That's
It's
a stretchy goal. It's
Yeah,
stretchy.
Maybe I'll make it 7 for our stretchy goal.
Stretchy. I know. By the end of the year, I'm going to have stretch.
I love
All
it.
right, let's do it.
All right, number 1. Would you rather manage a small sales team where everyone is super close but does not always meet quota, or a large sales team where it's very much an individual contributor environment but the team always meets quota?
The first option.
Second question. Would you rather have to deal with a client who constantly mansplains or one who constantly interrupts you to talk about sports?
Those are both horrible. I think the sports one, I guess.
You can just wear your t-shirt and be like, I'll listen, but I don't care.
Yes, 100%.
Would you rather work with a sales team that focuses on selling a wide variety of products or a team that specializes in one particular product?
One particular product.
Would you rather have to post an embarrassing selfie in the women in sales community every time you face a rejection? Or would you rather never be allowed to listen to Beyonce again?
Okay. I mean, you guys are going to just get blasted with selfies, I guess. That's fine. It might be
can't
good
wait.
exercise.
Would you rather give a talk about community building or sales in front of 1 million people?
Ooh. That's a tough one. Sales, but it would be hard.
And then last question, but certainly not least, this was made by Ashley and very specific to you. So if people don't know you, they might not get this one.
Oh, no.
Would you rather have to decorate a 3-tier cake every time someone says yes to a sponsorship, or tell Amy Volas you ate an octopus every time someone says no to a sponsorship?
Absolutely option one. I still, to this day, if anybody knows Amy Volas, she is the queen of the octopus. And I, behind the scenes here, I do like an occasional octopus ceviche little dish. And so she is not a fan of people eating octopus. So I would absolutely not like to ever tell her that I eat it. Nor do I.
Great choice. If Amy's listening, no octopuses were eaten. Don't worry.
No,
Not this time.
Not since my octopus teacher. Yeah, no.
Well, Alexine, thank you so much for joining us. This was amazing. You're amazing. And we appreciate the community that you run and that we're a part of. I suggest to everyone listening to go and join that community if you're not in there. Or if you're in there, start engaging because there's incredible women and content in there. But thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate you.
Thank you for
I'll wrap
having
it up.
me.
Yeah. The entire purpose of this podcast is to elevate the voices of women in revenue, and we think the mission of your community aligns very nicely with that goal. We appreciate having you on today, and hopefully we'll have some other chances to collaborate in the future. For those listening, you can also follow Alexine on LinkedIn for some great sales and community content and join the club, like Katrina said. And if you'd like to listen to Alexine's song, Run the World by Beyonce, as well as the walk-up songs of our other guests, you can find our playlist on Spotify by searching for Ashley and Katrina's Infinite Revenue Playlist. Thanks, and keep supporting each other, ladies.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Ashley and Katrina's Infinite Revenue Playlist. This show is powered by ComSoar, the go-to-network company. ComSoar is the complete suite of tools for teams looking to grow, activate, and engage their networks. If you enjoyed the learnings and banter in this episode, there's more where this came from. Follow Ashley and Katrina's Infinite Revenue Playlist wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. See you next time.